Just setting up our questions that we're going to do today. I'm also just going to give everyone a quick second to join the live as well, and just make sure that everybody is here. If anybody isn't here or is seeing this now later on, it's because you can see obviously the recording that I'm going to post to the members group. So if you have to leave the live at any point, that's okay. Okay, I'm going to wait a little bit longer, and just remember everybody, you can ask your questions in the question section, in the comment section. In this actual video, there is a little chat session that you can put comments and queries in, and I'll go through them and answer them for you, and work on anything that maybe you're worried about for finals and that you want me to touch on. So just as we wait for the last few people to join us, this video I'm going to do, or this live lesson, I'm going to do as many of your requested topics as possible. So today we are mainly focusing on a past paper. This particular paper is the September 2022, the one from the Eastern Cape. I quite liked some of their questions, and I thought they were quite difficult, some more challenging ones. So I thought it was a good idea to do them, simply because if we can do them together, now you can be prepared for what could be the worst or the hardest subject or the most difficult topic to get. So we're going to do a homeostatic control. This is on the water levels. Then we're going to do a question on human reproduction. Specifically, this is an investigative question, which they really like a lot recently. So I'm sort of seeing a pattern here. So we're going to do one of those. We're going to do an EO question and balance and how to actually answer that correctly. And then we are going to do a question on plant hormones. These are like the four main requested topics that I noticed from the members. So I'm going to start off by doing our question on homeostasis and water. So this is a question one, just to point it out to you. So it should be a little bit easier, but sometimes what happens is the homeostasis question often goes in question one, and it's not hard. It's just that if you don't understand the complex content before this, it's a little bit harder to actually answer. But let's get into the question now. So the diagram below represents the homeostatic control of water levels, and let's just make sure we know that we're talking about water in the blood when a person is dehydrated during a soccer match. Those are all important pieces of information because it ultimately could tell us, is he taking water in? Is he trying to counteract? What is he doing? Is he sweating? That's also really important. Okay, so let's have a look at the breakdown in the diagram. It says gland B releases more hormone C into the blood. So whatever this gland is, we're getting more of that hormone. Then part D in the kidneys, so that is, this hormone is going to part D in the kidneys. That part in the kidneys allows the water level in the blood to rise. We go back to being normal, right? So that's the standard sort of loop. But then we go water level drops. Part A in the brain is stimulated, and then gland B releases more hormone C into the blood, and as we go around and around and around. Now, I think it's very obvious what they are going to ask us. First of all, what you should do before you start is fill in these missing letters even before you begin, and you'll be pleasantly surprised that you often get the question right before you even answer the questions. And it's actually quite a comforting thing, because sometimes when you read the question, you overthink and then you write the wrong answer. But if you just fill it in now while it's sitting like this, it's more likely that you are going to give the correct answer. So let's start off with part A of the brain that is stimulated when the water levels drop. Now, we should know that this is referring to the hypothalamus. In some people's textbooks, it also says the pituitary gland. From what I can remember, we will accept both at the end of the year, but hypothalamus in a lot of matric textbooks is a part of the brain that is responding to this. And I'm going to lean to the hypothalamus because if we read the next question, it says, gland B releases more hormone C into the blood. Now, the hypothalamus is not actually necessarily a gland. The only gland that we have worked with before that is linked to water is the pituitary. So it's the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland secretes what hormone C? Well, what hormone do you want to be making when you are hot? You want to make ADH. Why? Because ADH stands for anti-diuretic hormone, so anti-urination hormone. You want to urinate less on a hot day, so you conserve more water on the inside of you. Now that is then sent to part D in the kidneys. Now part D in the kidneys is referring to the nephron, but I think you can be quite specific in this answer. You don't need to just say nephron in the kidneys. What you can say is the collecting duct. You can also probably say another option here would be like the, not distal, sorry, I'm writing proximal here. It should be distal. You could also put here distal. So the distal and collecting duct become more permeable, more water is reabsorbed, blood level rises, normal water, and there we go. So if we now go on to the questions, we have already answered all of these, the first four, which is great. And you feel confident in the final. And please, I suggest you do this, everyone, because you're going to feel great. You're going to feel like, oh, good, I've already done the question. I know what I'm talking about. And the question isn't confusing you. You're not getting caught up in the moment. So we already know what part A is. It was the hypothalamus. We knew the gland was the pituitary. We knew the hormone was ADH. And we knew the structure was the collecting or the distal convoluted tubule. Right. Now, let's go on to the next question. State the effect of hormone C. So you would have had to have correctly identified the hormone. So this is a little bit of a knock-on effect. If you get it wrong, then you might get this next one wrong. On the structure D in this person. So what is the effect? Well, ADH is an anti-diuretic hormone, which means you want less water in the urine, more water in the blood. So what you're going to do to the collecting duct is you are going to reduce its permeability. So what is the effect? It's going to become less permeable. And that's very important to know and to use that correct terminology when you work through questions like this one. The next one says, name one physiological process that will result in low levels of water in the blood of this person. Now, first things first, some of us do not speak English as a first language, so these kinds of questions can throw people. But I want you to focus on the other words in the text. So it says name one physiological process. Now, maybe you don't know what physiological process means. However, it does say that would result in low levels of water in the blood of this person. So even if you ignored this first bit and you read name one thing that will result in the low levels of water in this particular person playing soccer in the paragraph. So now you've got to think, what is this person doing? Exercising, and how are they losing water? Well, if you are exercising and you are hot, what do? You sweat. So the physiological process is sweating. That is how they are losing water. Okay, that is the physiological process that they're talking about. And so before you panic in a question like that, they've given you just enough information over here to answer the question, and they have given you enough information from the introductory sentence at the beginning to tell you what is happening. Now, before we go on and before I look at some of your questions, I want to remind everybody of the following template answer when you do these kinds of homeostatic control functions. I'm just going to go backwards here and I'm just going to clear this page. I have spoken about this in my videos before, and also this is in the guideline, not the guidelines, in my study guide. And of course, if you remember, you have access to this, but I just want to remind everybody, when you do any homeostatic control function, whether it is pH, glucose, carbon dioxide, anything. All your answers always begin with a stimulus, right? That stimulus is picked up by a receptor. That receptor sends information to a control center. That control center creates a corrective measure, so something that is fixing the problem, right? That corrective measure is then sent to an effector. So in other words, it's going to go to someone who's going to fix the problem. That effector then carries out the effect, the instruction, and there is a moving back to the norm. And what I mean by norm, it means normal blood, water level, normal pH, normal CO2 level. And then sometimes, not always, there is a result, not always. And a good example for a result would be like if we were talking about ADH, it would be there is lower levels of water in the blood. The receptors in the hypothalamus pick that up. That is the control center as well. The control center sends a corrective measure, which is the pituitary gland sending a pituitary message, and the corrective message is sent to the is sent to the distal convoluted tubules. Those distal convoluted tubules then absorb or allow more water to enter back into the blood. The blood level returns back to norm, and you make less urine. So sometimes there is a result, sometimes there isn't. But this is the perfect way to answer any question like this. And this is often why there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or more marks in these big kind of questions. And those are often those like describe questions. Now, I'm going to have a quick look in the chat to see if there is anybody that has any questions before I go on to the next section, and questions on homeostasis. And then the next question we're going to go on to, if you have anything to think about, is going to be this investigation question on reproduction. So I'm just having a quick squiz at the chat. Okay, Tiara, I do see your question. You asked, will I be doing a prediction for your members? Yes, so everyone has been asking about when I'm going to do like the prediction for the finals. And for everybody else who's not a member, the prediction video is going to come out on the 11th, but members are going to see it before. So you will get to see it before everybody else gets to see it. So it's going to come out before that. And so that gives you a little bit of a head start. And that official video for the public, so everybody else, is going to come out on the 11th of November. I'm hoping that you guys are going to get it on the Monday rather than the Friday. All right, so that sort of answers your question. Precious, what are the common homeostasis questions? Sorry, your messages disappeared. I'm going to bring it back. What are the common homeostasis questions like? Which ones are often asked? Okay, great question. So the two main homeostasis questions they like to ask is the glucose and insulin and glucagon. They love asking that question. And the other one is water and salt. So those are their two favorites. I will say though, they haven't asked carbon dioxide in a while. I must just make sure they didn't ask it last year, but I don't think they did. And I have a feeling that they might, if they haven't asked it last year, they may potentially do it this year. But again, I will put that in my prediction video as well. But Precious, if you're preparing, generally the two most common questions are glucose and how you regulate it, and water and salt. So that means the hormones insulin, glucagon, aldosterone, and ADH are your important hormones to focus most of your attention on. Okay, all right. If not any more questions, I'm going to move on to the next question, which is an investigative question. And I know we actually we are often quite afraid of these questions, and I understand why, because you can't really prepare for them. Like, you can know what a variable is, but you might not know, you might not know what they're going to ask you, like what content are they going to ask. Now it's become very, 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 very common for them to do these kinds of questions on male reproduction, but it doesn't mean they can't do it for female. They've done it twice in a row for male, so I feel like potentially it could be the female's turn this year. But again, I'm going to put all of that in my prediction video, and I'm going to research it properly. I'm not just going to make predictions off of, nothing. But let's get into the question. So an investigation was conducted, and please always read this beginning paragraph here, because actually right in the beginning, it tells you the aim, and it says to determine the effect of zinc supplementation on the levels of testosterone in the blood of weightlifting males. So whenever you see a sentence that starts with to determine, to test, to see, to observe, anything like that, that is your aim. Now, why is the aim so important? Because the variables are in there, the independent and the dependent, but we'll come back to that just now. The procedure was as follows. They used 60, and I'm highlighting 60 because it's an important number when it comes to validity. They were all the same age, and they were asked to participate in this investigation. They were given the same diet for 6 weeks, so the same diet and for the same period of time. Their testosterone levels in the blood were measured every day for a 6-week period. They were given a zinc supplement, let's highlight that, with their diet every day for the 6 weeks. So they measured their testosterone every day, and they gave them zinc every day. The testosterone levels in the blood were measured again every day, and the average levels of testosterone in the blood were calculated before and after the zinc. And so just to break that down a little bit, in case we don't know what's happening here, these 60 men were all given the same diet for 6 weeks, and we tested their testosterone levels every day. They were given a zinc supplement with their diet every day for those 6 weeks. The testosterone levels in their blood were measured again every day, and then an average was calculated. So what they are actually doing here, everybody, is they were measuring their testosterone levels before they gave them the supplement, and then they were measuring them after they gave the supplement. So there's like a difference, and they calculated an average. Then it goes on to say the average free testosterone per group before and after the investigation was given below. And so here is the before, so that is the amount, and the after, and there's the amount, and we can obviously see there is an increase. Right, so now we've selected all the important information. Let's get into the questions. Identify in this investigation the independent and the dependent variable. Now, I just told you that these two things you will never get wrong if you just take it from the paragraph, or if this question said identify the aim, take it from the paragraph. Because if we go back up to the top of the paragraph and we go to the aim up here, this is where the variables are located. So it says to determine the effect of zinc supplementation. So first of all, that over there is going to be the independent variable because it's the thing we are testing. It then goes on to say on the levels of testosterone in the blood. That is the thing we are measuring, therefore that is our dependent variable. So already the paragraph has provided us with the two correct answers. So if we go back down here, our independent variable, I'm not going to write out the whole thing, but it would be the zinc that we're giving. And the dependent variable would be the testosterone amounts in the blood. And specifically, please don't forget to write in the blood, okay? Don't just say testosterone or zinc. I'm just shorthanding it for our video. All right, number 252. Describe, now this is why actually I chose this question because I quite liked it. It's difficult. Describe the control that was done. Now this is interesting because if people go back to the paragraph at the beginning, they go, but ma'am, there's no control. They didn't speak about having a control. They didn't have a control. Like, where is it? Well, they've done a very unusual control here. And the control in this particular one is actually the group when they tested them before they started. So if we look back at our results, as well as in our paragraph, they spoke about the fact that their testosterone levels in their blood were measured every day for a 6-week period. That was before they started, right? So it says they were given a zinc supplement with their diet every day, and then the testosterone levels in their blood were measured again. So what they mean is they tested the testosterone levels before And we can see that here also in our table. And that is the control. Why? Because it's part of the investigation where the independent variable is missing, right? That's what a control is. It's when you take away the independent variable. And so if they haven't received the zinc supplement yet, they haven't received the independent variable. And so when we write out the control here, and it says describe, and yes, this is a describe question only for 2 marks, so it's actually going to be quite short, and you don't need to elaborate or explain yourself, because it's not an explain question. All you're simply going to say for this one is that the control for this investigation was the group of men, or the men before the zinc was given, and it was when their testosterone levels were at their norm, so what their normal levels of testosterone was. And that is the control group, and they are used to compare to. And I'd like you to add that in. Whenever you speak about a control group, we are talking about comparing. So I would love for you to always put that in your answer, to say the group that was chosen was the group before they received zinc, and we tested for their normal testosterone levels in order to compare to afterwards when they receive their zinc. So please always make sure you put the word compare in your answer to make sure you get it right. Okay. Then moving on to number 3, state 2 variables that should have been considered about the zinc supplements to ensure validity. Now this is a question that is easy if you read the language properly. It says 2 variables, so we need to give 2. But then it says should. Now, a lot of students overlook this word and they go, oh, I must just give 2 things they kept the same. No. It says what should be kept the same. Should means they didn't. So you can't go back to the paragraph and go, well, they had 60 men and they had the same diet and it was the same period of time. No, you will get it wrong. They are asking you what should have been done. In other words, they didn't do it. So what do they need to do to improve the validity? And specifically, not just anything, they want to know about the zinc supplement. Now, nowhere in the paragraph, if we actually go back up, nowhere in the paragraph do they tell you they used the same amount of zinc. See, it doesn't say it anywhere here. It just says they were given a zinc supplement. So our first answer can be the amount of zinc. That can be our first answer. So the same amount of zinc. They also, I'd like to point out, never told you when during the day. They just said they were given the zinc supplement every day. But they didn't say they gave the zinc supplement to each man on the same time every day. So we could also do the same time every day that they administered the zinc. If we go back up to the top here, another one, and this is just extra now, but do you see they don't tell you how much zinc? Sorry, when I say how much, I mean the concentration. So let me just tell you the difference between the two. If I talk about amount, I'm talking about like, did they give them 1 tablet or did they give them 2 tablets? Another way to also look at it is concentration. And when I mean concentration, I mean, did they give them 30 milligrams or did they give them 100 milligrams? They didn't actually tell you that. So that's another one that you can write down if you want, and that is the same concentration of zinc. Moving on to the next question, and that is state 2 ways in which the reliability of the results was ensured. Again, I'd like to point out that it says was, which means you have to take it from the paragraph. You cannot make up your own. Now, there are 3 standard answers when it comes to reliability. And I'm running out of space on this page, so I'm just going to flick back. The 3 that are linked to reliability are increasing your sample size, right? The next one is calculate an average. And the third one is the repeat, right? Those are all about reliability. Another one that they also accept is that the sample was random. It's a very rare one to see, but like, you know, they randomly sampled individuals, or they randomly chose people for the investigation. But those are your 4 options. Now remember, they are asking for 2 that were done. So you can't just write any of these. You have to see which of these was actually in the paragraph. So if we go back and we have a look here, which were the ones that they have done? So when it comes to increasing sample size or repeating, the length of time is also quite important, because that can be read under increasing sample size. In other words, they didn't do it for 1 week, they did it for 6 weeks. Another reliability one, which is down here, is they calculated an average, which is, as we saw on our list, 2 ways that they could have ensured the reliability. And in terms of repeating, did they repeat this? No. And before you say, but they did it every single day, isn't that repeating? No, that is not repeating. That is just part of the experiment. The experiment was 6 weeks long, and they did it every day for 6 weeks. If, however, they repeated the full 6 weeks again, and if they said that somewhere, then yes, that would be a reliability point, but it's not. So those are the 2 that we're going to go with. We're going to go with they calculated an average, and they did a long experiment. So the experiment, the sample size was big. In other words, they took it over a 6-week period. It was long. It doesn't always, when they say increased sample size, refer to number of people or number of animal that you used. It can be also the length of time you did it for. Okay, then we're almost done on this question before we do any questions from the chat. Write a general conclusion, and a lot of us are not so great at writing conclusions, but write a general conclusion that can be drawn from the results obtained. Now, whenever you write a conclusion, everybody, you must always include the independent variable and the dependent variable in your answer, because that's how you get 2 marks. And we already know that the independent and dependent variable would be the zinc and the testosterone. So your answer would be, and it must include these variables that we mentioned earlier. It must go something like this. In conclusion, the zinc supplementation increases or does increase the amount of testosterone in the bloodstream, as seen in the results. And that's true, because in the results, we went from 16.8 to 22.5. So it's a very general conclusion. And you're just showing the relationship between the 2 variables, that as you give zinc, the testosterone levels increase. And that's it. All right, let's do the last question quickly. State 2 functions of testosterone in male reproduction. This is just like a last little add-on question they like to do to see if you know what testosterone does. The first obvious one is it's there for sperm production. And then secondly, it could also be linked to things like the growth of like genitalia. I would avoid, everyone, the secondary results, you know, like broadening shoulders, body hair, voice deepens. I would avoid those ones. And the reason I say that is because this question says male reproduction. In other words, they only want to know which of these points links to reproduction. And no, the amount of muscle mass, the broadening of the shoulder, the deepening of the voice, the body hair growth, that is not directly linked to reproduction. It's secondary. They only want to know the primary characteristics that are linked to testosterone, and these are the only 2, sperm production and the growth of genitals. Okay, now let's just have a quick break and have a look at our questions, if there are in the chat, starting with Tiara. What are some general planning steps? So I know this one comes up a lot and everyone hates planning steps because you never know what to say. For this one, if I just go back to my blank page here and I'm going to get rid of everything. For some planning steps, what I suggest is you always start your answers with the word decide. Always. So a planning step would be decide on, and then you fill in the blank. So we can decide on the sex of the participant, right? So we're going to do this with men. We're going to decide on the type of supplement, right? Are we going to test zinc? Are we going to test magnesium? Are we going to test whatever? Decide on the length of experiment. So how long are we going to do this for? The length of the experiment, right? Another one. So these are all 1, 2, 3. Let's do one more, a fourth one. They'll never ask you 4. They'll probably ask you like 2 planning steps. Decide on the diet, as they mentioned in the paragraph that the men were going to take. They just said they took the same diet, but you never actually heard what kind of diet they were on. Were they on a vegetarian diet? Were they on a meat-only diet? So those are some planning steps, and a good way to always start it, and please do this in the final exam, is you say decide on, and then fill in the blank as you go along. Okay, let's have a look at our next question. Ma'am, how can I ensure that I get at least 40 out of 50 for the section A? Okay, this is a great question. And for many of you, it's the easiest place to get full marks is in the section A. And what it comes down to often is how good are you at the following 2 things. I'm just going to remove this. So I'm going to just quickly give you a little helping hand here for multiple choice questions, okay? To get full marks in multiple choice, which is often sometimes where we go wrong, there are always 4 options, okay? And this is how I teach it to my students too. In those 4 options, there is the very right answer. There is the very wrong answer. Okay, always. And you know that because when you've done multiple choice, you can sometimes see the very wrong answer immediately. So there's the very right answer, the very wrong answer, and then there's these 2 others. Now, one of them is going to be what I like to call the close link answer. And a close link answer often means that the spelling is similar. So if it's a particular word, they're trying to confuse you, and they would do it like this. They would give you, if they're looking for the answer glucagon, like that's the correct answer, but one of the other answers is glycogen. The spelling is similar, and if you look too quickly and you're not paying attention, you write down this letter, whatever this letter is, and this is the wrong answer. So often in multiple choice, there is what I call the closely linked one. So, and often it's the spelling. And then last but not least, this one I like to call, and I'm calling it a red herring. And if you don't know what that means, it's called a distractor. It distracts you. Why does it distract you? It distracts you because you have seen this word, whatever it is in the options, often linked to the right answer. In other words, if it's number 1 and number 4, these 2 words are often found in the same explanation. And so the red herring is a distractor. It wants to distract you from what the correct answer is. So often teachers use the red herring as the one that you often misunderstand, or the one you misidentify. Okay, I'll give you a good example so you know what I mean. Let's say the question says, where does fertilization take place? Let's say that's the multiple choice question. My first option is the correct option, so it's the fallopian tube. Then I've got all the very, very wrong answers, right? So I've got the very wrong answer, I've got the closely linked, and I'm going to give you the red herring now. So let's do the very wrong answer. The very wrong answer, ovary. Okay. The close link, but not exactly the same, is, we will say something like vagina. Now, I know the spelling is not the same as fallopian tube, but you see what I mean, where the vagina and the fallopian tube are closely linked to one another, but it's not the same place. The red herring, or the distractor in this question, would be the uterus. Because often teachers know and examiners know that our students get these two locations not confused because they look the same, but we know you get them confused because a lot of students think that the fertilization happens in the uterus because that's where babies grow. That's where the embryo grows. So they automatically go, oh, it must be the uterus. But in actual fact, it's the fallopian tube. So when you get this kind of thing in the exam, what you should be doing is going through the list. First of all, deleting the very wrong answer, knowing it's not that. Then in your next three options going, okay, which of these here is closely linked, but doesn't seem right because of its spelling, or maybe because of what I have learned about how reproduction works. And so we would delete vagina. Now it comes down to 1 and 4, which is the right answer. So now you are going to definitely have to rely on your knowledge, and you are going to have to think, okay, where does fertilization take place? And you have learned that fertilization does not take place in the uterus. So we're going to delete that and obviously then pick the correct answer being the fallopian tube. The other and last thing I will say before we move on to the next question is the following. If you don't study your terms, everybody, you know the terminology section in section 1? If you don't study your terms, it's not going to go down well for you. And in terminology, some of their favorite things to ask, and I'll put this also in my prediction video as well, some of their favorite terms they like to ask, and I don't know why they love to ask these, but they love to ask about prolactin. They love to ask about protein synthesis. And this is in the terminology section, right? They love also in section 1 of paper 1, they like to ask you questions on the different reproduction strategies. So when I say that, I'm talking about oviparous, oviviparous, viviparous. That's where they love to ask that. Another term that they really love asking you is, something like the glands. They love you to name the different glands, like where the different glands are, like the adrenal gland, the pituitary gland, the ovary, the testes, all those glands. They love asking that. If you don't do well in your terminology section, it's actually a clear indication that you're not going to do well in the rest of the paper. And I know that that's scary to hear, but just think of it like this. If you can't use the term properly, how are you going to explain yourself later on in the exam when they ask the longer questions? So how do you get good at it? You get good at terminology with flashcards. And just for those of you who haven't gone on my website, I actually have a whole bunch of flashcards, digital ones that you can use. I've only uploaded 3 topics for now, and I'm going to add a few more as we go towards finals, but you can use those flashcards to learn all your terms. And that's the best way to do terminology. All right, I want to look at the other questions, and then I want to move on. Wonderful Wise. What is the composition of semen after a vasectomy? After a vasectomy, semen will have all of the secretions from the prostate, the cowper, and the seminal vesicle with no sperm. And that would be your answer. Courtney, will this video be posted on the members playlist to access this? Yes, of course. Courtney, this video is going to be available to all of the members in your members only playlist. Once we're done here, that's where I will push it to after we're done. All right. Precious, what is our message here? They are really helpful. What's very helpful? Sorry, Precious, I can't read the rest of your message. The videos. I think the videos are helpful. I think that's what you mean. Okay. let's go on to our second last question. The ear, right? We're going to do the ear and then we're going to do plant hormones. Oh, the flashcards. Thank you, Precious. I am going to be putting up more. So if you guys want to use those flashcards, they are for free. There's no charge involved. They are on my website and they link you to a flashcard website called Save All. And that's where I've been putting them. So if you can find it on missangler.co.za, I'm probably going to add in a few more decks in the next few days. So, you know, like a deck on the other topics. Okay, let's move on. So we've got the ear. This is a very requested question, and you'll see also now there's quite a long question here, but describe the diagram. Oh, sorry, the diagram below shows a part of the human ear. So that's what we're looking at. And again, I love to just spend some time, and remember, I suggest you do this too. You should spend some time labeling everything here before you even answer the questions. So first things first, let's start off with A and B. A and B are often misidentified as each other, so we swap them around. This is the round window. This is the oval window. And that is where sound goes into the cochlea, and that's where sound comes out of the cochlea. Then we have C. Now C is pointing to this whole structure, which is both the semicircular canals and the saccular and utriculus at the bottom here. So this whole thing together is called the vestibular apparatus. Then we have the cochlea. And then this is the auditory nerve. And that's obviously the nerve that then goes to the brain. Now, again, I want everybody to, in their final exam, do exactly what we did here. Ooh, exactly what we did here now. You're going to label everything before you move on. Please don't try the questions before you attempt even the simple thing of labeling it. Right. So, number one, identify part D. Congratulations, we just did. Cochlea, right? Number two, state one function of part E. Now, because we've correctly identified it and we've given ourselves confidence that we know that we are correct, we'll be able to also give the correct function. So the function of part E, it's the auditory nerve, is to do what? Conduct impulses. So I'm going to say here, conduct impulses from the cochlea to the cerebrum, right? So we're going to go conduct impulses from our cochlea to cerebrum. And please be specific. Don't just say brain. Say cerebrum, because the brain, as you know, is made up of the cerebellum, the cerebrum, the medulla oblongata. So you got to be specific on that one. Right, the next one. State why part A must absorb excess pressure waves. So we go back up here. Have a look here. Round window, and it says it absorbs excess pressure waves. That is because, if you didn't know this, everybody, and not every teacher teaches this, so I'm not sure if everybody has learned this, but when sound goes through the oval window, okay, and it's quite a distance down here, it's because they've stretched it out, but when the sound goes down and then around in the cochlea, and it eventually actually comes out through the round window, when it comes out here, it has to come out because when sound travels in a closed space like this, if it stayed inside the cochlea, you would have what we call reverberation or endless sound, an echo, if you will. And so if the question says, state why part A must absorb the excess pressure waves, and the pressure waves are referring to the liquid in the ear, those are the pressure waves. It must absorb the extra pressure waves so that there is no echo or reverberation or an endless ringing in the ears, because that's exactly what happens. The sound would just get stuck inside of here and go around and around and around and around. And so it gives a little exit point for excess sounds to leave. Okay. Now, here is the big question. And I think this is the one everyone is so afraid of to get, which is describe how the structure indicated by C maintains balance. And it's for 7 marks. So it's a big question. Now, in my study guideline, I have given you the perfect answer for this. So if you are a Rescue Me member, you should be using the study guide to answer this question. But I want to bring your attention to something before you jump into this question straight away and go, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to say. There's one very sneaky little thing about this question. It's not just asking about maintaining balance. It's asking about how C maintains balance. Now, if we go back to the picture, do you see here that C is grouping both the semicircular canals and the utriculus and sacculus? Which means, everyone, you have to talk about both. In my guideline, I talk about the semicircular canals in one paragraph, and then I talk about the utricle and sacculus in a second paragraph. Normally, they are asked separately because one restores posture and the other restores balance. However, this question is asking about how both of them work together. And so for 7 marks, you are going to have to speak about both of those structures. So let me go over to a blank page, and I'm just going to give you the highlight reel. But that means you are going to have to speak about your semicircular canals. Spelled this wrong. Your semicircular canal. You're going to have to talk about those receptors, which are the cristae, right? You're going to have to talk about the fact that there is a change in speed of the head. Then you go on to talk about the utriculus and sacculus. And you're going to talk about the maculae. You're going to talk about the fact that there is a change in position of the head. Right? And then together you speak about the fact that an impulse is generated. Where is it sent to? It is sent to the cerebellum. And last but not least, you speak about how the muscles restore balance. Right? That will give you 7 marks. I haven't written it out in full, but essentially you're identifying the receptor, the stimulus, receptor, stimulus, the control center, which is picking up the fact that you are not straight, and your body is not in the right posture. So an impulse is generated, it's sent to the cerebellum, and the cerebellum, which is the control center, sends a message to the effectors, which are the muscles, and you restore balance, and that is the result. So that would get you your 7 marks. I would strongly suggest you refer to my study guide if you have it, in order to answer that question. But I also tackle this in my ear videos on my YouTube page as well. So you can go to the ear, specifically the ear videos. I do also talk about this, and I show you how to answer it. All right. I'm going to do the very last question, which is the plant one for today. And if there are any questions, just pop them in the chat so I can see them, if you do have anything. Otherwise, we're going to start the plant hormones. Okay, so the plant hormones, if I just wait for anybody, if they do have a question for me. The plant hormones are always going to be asked in an investigation question like this. And already you should see some familiar things in this picture. So you shouldn't be overwhelmed and think, oh, I don't know what to do. And by the way, they like to put 2 investigation questions in the same paper. This is from all these questions. Oh, did I miss a question? Oh, I'm so sorry. I see. I did miss a question. I'm going back. One last question. Explain why, thank you for pointing that out. Explain why a rupture, which is a hole in part B, may lead to hearing loss. So if we go over to part B over here, right? So part B, the oval window, is a membrane. So this is a membrane sitting over here. And that means if you get a hole in it, why would that lead to hearing loss? So now you need to know the function of the oval window. So the function of the oval window is to transmit mechanical energy into pressure waves. Okay, so if that's the case, let me go over to my blank page and I'll answer it there now for you. Okay, if that is its job, where we're going to take mechanical and we turn it into those pressure waves, right? If I damage it, there's a hole in it and it's a little membrane. So normally that's the membrane intact, but now let's say there's a hole inside of it, which means that every time the ossicles beat against it, it's not going to make the sound we want. So now what you have to do when you answer that, and it's for 4 marks, I just want to quickly check if I go back. It's an explain question. So remember, with explain questions, and this is a great technique for exams, everybody, so keep this in mind, you always have a statement followed by a reason. Now we are going to need 3 reasons to get 4 out of 4. So we need a statement and then 3 reasons. So our statement is often the way you tell the marker, I know what the oval window does, right? So your statement is something along the lines of, oval window is responsible for transferring or transmitting or converting. Actually, let's use the word convert. I prefer the word convert because that's more accurate. Let's do that. For converting mechanical movement to pressure waves. Okay, so that's your statement. So you're telling the marker, I know what the oval window does. Tick. Now you're going to tell me, now what happens if the hole in the oval window is there? You're going to tell me what happens now to this process with your reasons. So now you can say, however, if there is a hole or a rupture, okay, we're going to go with these reasons. We're going to say, first things first, no conversion happens, right? Conversion meaning from mechanical to pressure wave. So no conversion happens. If no conversion happens, no stimulation in the cochlea happens. Tick, right? And if there's no conversion and then no stimulation in the cochlea, there is no sound generated, or we could replace the word sound actually with impulse. Generated and sent to brain, therefore no hearing. And now we get you your 4 out of 4. And so many people have said to me, oh mom, I never knew how to actually answer a 4-mark explain question. And you can use the same rule for any length of explain, as long as you have your statement and your reasons. So it's always 1 mark for the statement and then whatever's left over for all of your reasoning. And each reason links in to the next. Wonderful wise, why is there no stimulation? There is no stimulation because there's no pressure waves moving the little organ of Corti in the cochlea. So if we just go back to the diagram, if this part here is damaged and broken, there will be no conversion from mechanical to pressure wave, which means normally a pressure wave will move down here through the fluid and it will move into the cochlea and go around inside the cochlear fluid. The fluid inside the cochlea makes the organ of Corti, which is the structure that you hear with in your ear. It's the receptor inside the cochlea. And because there is no fluid moving it, you won't create an impulse. So to just clarify that for the stimulation one, the organ of Corti sort of looks like this. It's got a little gel base, and then it's got these little hairs that stick up. And above that is a little membrane that hovers. And when fluid moves in and around these hairs, the membrane on the top here vibrates backwards and forwards like this. And it stimulates these hairs. And these hairs convert that movement to an impulse that leaves and goes to the brain. And that then is interpreted by sound. So if there is no conversion of mechanical movement to pressure movement, then you can't stimulate the cochlea, so you can't stimulate the organ of Corti, and if you can't stimulate these little hairs, you'll never make an electrical impulse that will go along your nerve. And if you don't make an electrical impulse, no impulse will be generated and sent to the brain, therefore no hearing. Okay, alrighty then. I must move on, but I want to read one last question. Tiara, ma'am, are we allowed to write our answers like explaining balance and genesis and bullet points, or do we have to write them in a paragraph form? It's a great question. I get it often from my own students too. I would avoid writing in bullet points. However, could you not just write the bullet points like you were writing full sentences? Do you see what I'm saying here? So don't bullet point, just write it in sentences. Even if you write one sentence on a line and then another sentence on a line and then another sentence on the line. Do you know what I'm saying? So don't use the bullet points. Just write, if you need to, each sentence on a different line, if that helps your brain. And obviously start with a capital letter and a full stop at the end. Hey, it's very important that you do that. But that's my suggestion, and I tell my students the same thing. Okay. Right, last question. Here we go. Let's dive in. So, plant hormones. Again, we're going to take the aim from the beginning here. It says an investigation was done to determine the effect of gravity on the direction of growth in a stem. So that is our aim. And we're looking at gravity, so we know it's geotropism, right? And we did this following procedure. We took two plants. They were the same species, height and age. So it's giving us some good validity information here. Plants were exposed to the same environmental conditions, so water, nutrients, blah, blah, blah. Both plants were attached to a clinostat, as shown in the diagram, and they were exposed to light from all directions. So we now know that we're not testing for phototropism because it's coming from all directions, the light. If it was unilateral light, then maybe. Here is the experiments shown set up. So here they are. This is the rotating clinostat versus the stationary clinostat. Now it seems as though, and if we just take a note of the picture of our plant, nothing has happened yet. We can't see anything just as of yet because they're both identical in the pictures like that. Nothing has happened. Okay, so let's look at the first question. Number one, suggest one reason why it's important for the stem of the plant to grow towards the light. It's only for 1 mark, and our suggestion means you can come up with something that you've learned about before. And why do you think it's very obvious for plants to grow towards the light? Well, for photosynthesis, right? Because they need light for photosynthesis. So that's an easy one. 1 mark there. Okay, let's go on to the next question. What is the term given, so it's a term they're looking for the growth movement of a plant where it is in response to gravity? I just mentioned to you now, it is geotropism. Okay, easy so far, not too bad these questions. State the purpose, so what is the reason for having a rotating clinostat in diagram 1 during the investigation? Well, when the clinostat rotates, and yes, the pot plant is sideways, but when it rotates like this, it means that every single side of the plant gets an even distribution of gravity. Whereas on the one that's not rotating, gravity is going to pull it it's going to try and pull it downwards. And so what we would expect to see is this plant that's not rotating, right, will start to grow up away from gravity, whereas this plant here will actually start to just continue growing outwards straight. So that's what we expect to see. So state the purpose of the rotating clinostat. The purpose is for even distribution of light. Excuse me, not light. Oh, let's get rid of that. It's not light, I beg your pardon. It's gravity. So that gravity is evenly distributed to our pot plant, so it grows evenly, right? Now, let's get to the big one, the 5-mark and the 4-mark questions. They always put the hard questions at the end, so prepare yourself for that as you go through this. Number 4, explain the results that will be obtained after 2 weeks in diagram 2. And it's for 5 marks, okay? So it's quite lengthy. Now, if we go back to what I added in on the picture here, do you see I predicted it's going to grow up like that? That's how it should grow. Why? Because you should have enough knowledge about geotropism that in stems are negatively geotropic, which means they grow away from gravity. Now, that means we're going to bend up. But you can't just say the plant is going to grow away from gravity, full stop, and get 5 marks, right? It's just not possible. And as I just showed you now, in an explain question, you need to give statement, reason, 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 reason. So let me show you how to do that for a 5-mark question, which I know sounds impossible, but it's not. Okay. Precious, I will answer your question when I'm just done here. Okay, so how do you answer this? So statement, remember, now this one is out of 5, so we need 1 statement, and then we need 1, 2, 3, 4 reasons, right? So we're going to get down to those 4 reasons. So it says explain. Let me just read the question again. Explain the results. So we are explaining the results. So we are explaining this. How did we get to this plant turning upwards? So, statement. The stem will bend upwards away from gravity. Right? That's our statement. That's our first mark. And now we need to explain. Now we made that statement. We need to give reasons why this has happened. Okay, so first reason. The first reason is our auxins collect on the lower side, right? Which means they are in a high concentration, right? Because they collected on the underside and they're now in a high concentration, the cells on the lower side are inhibited and don't elongate. In other words, they don't get longer. And by the way, elongation, if we're not so sure what that means, is when a cell goes from being like small and short and square to being long and rectangular like that. So we're saying this is not happening. They stay short and square like that. Okay. Then, because we are describing how this happened, now we've got to talk about the upper side of the stem. So, on the upper side, auxins are, you can say less, you can say there is also a lower concentration, right? And because there's a lower concentration, cells on upper side are stimulated to elongate and therefore bend away or up from gravity. Boom. 5 marks in the bag, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with our statement. Okay. Again, this is really well answered in my study guide as well of how to do this. And I have some videos also in my playlist that you should go and watch. And let me do these last 2 questions. If the growth tip of stem 1 was removed, so the growth tip of stem 1 was removed at the start of the investigation, explain the results that will be obtained after 2 weeks. If you were to cut the tip of the stem off, right, what's going to happen? Now remember, that's where we make auxins. So if we cut this bit off over here, it's still rotating, but what's going to happen? Now again, it's an explain mark for 4. It's an explain question for 4 marks. So you make a statement and then 3 reasons. So the statement is auxins are produced in the tip of the apical bud, mark. If you were to remove them, then because we are rotating, it will not grow longer. So in other words, it won't grow straight and longer, but rather it will grow lateral buds. It'll grow lateral sides. Because remember, if we cut it off, everybody, if this is cut off here, this here, there is no way for auxins to move down into the stem. And as we know, auxins are responsible for apical dominance, which means that they are responsible for, you know, when trees have this sort of triangular shape to it, like that. Now, if I cut the top of the tree off, what happens is the tree gets wider, like a square. It doesn't get pointy on the top. And so what happens here on this plant, if you were to describe it, is we cut off the tip and we remove the auxins. So if the auxins are not there, there's no more apical dominance, which means even though this little clinostat is rotating, we'll start to grow lateral buds. In other words, we'll start to grow more branches coming out the sides here. So it will get wider laterally, but it will continue to just be the same height. It won't actually get longer. And that's what we would say for that one. Okay, last question. Name, go down here, this is my highlighter, one other hormone which stimulates the growth of, and I think it's just being cut off here because let me see if I can make this a bit bigger, but I don't think I can. No. This would have said the growth of the plant. So the other hormone is gibberellins. Okay, gibberellins, and they are the ones that are responsible for the lateral growth of plants. That's something that's just a 1 mark answer. You wouldn't need to elaborate on that. Okay, so I'm going to quickly look at our comments quickly before we go. We've had a very good productive lesson. Okay, let's go to Precious's question. What past papers do you recommend we do from the past years? Great question, Precious. I would actually only focus on papers from 2020 and 2021. The reason for that is because the exams layout has changed. There's no more essay questions, so don't focus too much on papers from like 2016 and 2017. I would also suggest everybody for you to do supplementary papers. So when the paper, if you're reading the description of the list of practice papers, please also try and do the rewrite papers in June, the supplementaries in September. Please try and do all of those as well in the last 2 to 3 years. I wouldn't go further than 2019. So 2019, 2020, and 2021. Those would be the years I would practice with. Wonderful Wise, ma'am, how do you know that the auxins collect on the lower side? We know that the auxins in the stem collect on the lower side because auxins are attracted to gravity. So they sink down towards gravity. That's how I know they collect there. All right, Tiara, ma'am, do you want me to correct you? So geotropisms, auxins collect on the lower side, which is a higher concentration, and the upper side is a lower. But for photosynthesis, auxins on the light side are low. And yes, you are 100% correct, Tiara. And Tiara is just bringing up a really good point. I'm just going to clarify for all of you who are still here. In the stem, when it bends towards the light, so like if this is the light, the auxins collect on the dark side. That's all the auxins. And this is on the dark side. So the dark side has the high auxins and the light side has the low amount of auxins. Like there might just be a few. There won't be much on this side. And that's in the shoot or the stem, right? As opposed to the root, if this is my seed growing out a root, and it's curving down like that because it's going to grow down into the soil. Let me change color. The auxins collect on the lower side because of gravity. They move down here. And there might be like just a little bit up here, but not much. And so on the root, on the side of gravity, on the lower side, the part closest to gravity, there is a high concentration. On the upper part, there is a low concentration. And because of that, cells on the lower side, they do not elongate, so they stay small and square like this. Whereas on the upper side, they become long like that. And that's what causes the bending of the root to go down. It's almost like someone's put a stop street here. So all of these can't actually grow longer, whereas all the cells above them do, and that's what causes this bending down. So yes, Tiara, your answer as you had it there was perfect. All right, what is the function of abscisic acid? Abscisic acid is for abscission, which basically means losing your fruit and losing leaves. That's its function. So if you look at a stem, and you look at the leaf, right, where it's attached. When it's time for this leaf to fall, abscisic acid basically burns this off like this, so the leaf can fall off without damaging the plant. Also, abscisic acid, if I remember correctly, I just did this the other day when I did revision with my grade 12s, but abscisic acid also promotes dormancy. In seeds. In other words, when there's high levels of abscisic acid, the seed is dormant. It's like sleeping. The moment you put the seed in soil with some water, the abscisic acid levels drop, and then the seed starts to grow and germinate. Okay. Last little question. I think they prevent germination. Yes, you are correct, Wonderful Wise. If you are answering Tiara's question, it is preventing germination. Perfect. All right, everybody, that is it for today's lesson. I am going to upload this video to our members playlist for any of you who want to go back and just have a look at it and then fast forward to the sections you want to watch again. But I will be doing some more live lessons, and please keep your eyes peeled for video requests. Like, I want to know what questions you want me to do and attempt and answer. So I am going to be asking you that on the community page. Keep your eyes peeled for some more lessons, as well as my prediction, my exam prediction video that's going to come out soon. I promise you guys are going to see it before everybody else. And that's it for today, everyone. And I will see you all again soon. Wonderful Wise, ma'am, are you going to do other questions from past year papers? Yes, I will. The paper 2 live, probably I'm going to try and do it this week coming, the paper 2 one. Either during the week or in the weekend. I know that some of you are obviously, I mean, you're in Matric, so you're writing your papers. So don't worry, if we do a live lesson, it will be in the afternoon when you're home. You know, I'm not going to do it obviously in the morning when you're not at home, because I'm also at school as well. But keep your eyes peeled for that little notification on the community page, and I will see you all again soon, everybody.